This time I'm going to show you how to make this very quick and simple vintage inspired hanging heart. This is a great way of using up those bits of ribbon and lace and the odd buttons that you've had knocking around for a while that you didn't know what to do with. It's actually a project from my book, Half Yard Vintage. And this is full of ideas and inspiration and, whoops, let me just get that up. And lots of useful and pretty projects for you as well. Now, of course, you don't have to use vintage fabrics or vintage looking fabrics and lace. You can make any of the projects in any kind of fabric that you wanted to. But I just love the feel of these combinations of you know, like pearl buttons, paper flowers, and I had so much fun just decorating things, and no two items you make tend to be the same at all. There is a template for the heart in the back of the book, so that's the hanging hearts as I made them for the book. You can see they're all very different. But if you have a look on my debbieshawsewing.com website, there is a free heart template, so please don't feel that you have to go and buy the book if you want to make the heart. So that's as I made it, so on the coat hanger, but you can hang them individually. They would be lovely if they had any kind of scent inside them. Maybe a lavender would smell really nice, and hang it over the side of your bed. And they make really pretty and easy to make gifts for anybody in your family as well. So that's Half Yard Vintage. I'll leave you a materials list in the description box underneath the video, so go and raid your stash, dig out your buttons and your beads and your lace and your ribbons and all of the bits and bobs that you've been storing for ages but didn't know what to do with them, and let's get sewing. So I've got all of my bits of lace and ribbon and beads and string and buttons and anything else that you want to embellish your heart with. I've cut out one pattern piece, but I haven't cut the second pattern piece out yet because I need to make the seam that goes down the back. So cut yourself a piece of fabric slightly larger than the heart, cut it in half, and then we're going to sew it back together again. And I'm using around about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. There we go. And I'm going to press the seam open and like so. And then we'll place the heart over the top of the seam with the point and the little V shape here lining up with that seam. So the seam down the back is going to be straight down the center. So let's pop a couple of pins in there just to hold it still while we cut it out. And then just cut around the shape of the heart. And before we sew these two pieces together, we'll decorate the front of the heart. So pop that to one side, and then just arrange things as you think they would look nice. So I'm going to put some floral ribbon in the background, and then another piece of lace over the top of that, but I think the floral ribbon is a little bit too wide, so I'm going to make a little snip in here and tear it, and then I still get that lovely frayed edge. So that can go straight across the center now. Then I think I'll have that piece of lace over the top, and then to top that off, another piece of ribbon. And I think just keeping the tones all the same. If I'd have used white lace, that wouldn't have worked. I could have used a deep red or a green ribbon, that would work, but purple certainly wouldn't. So just keep everything nice and tonal and quite gentle. So I'm going to sew the lace and the wider ribbon on first of all. I'm just going to give that a quick press because it does look a little bit wrinkly now I've torn it. That's better. And then using just a glue stick. You could use a basting spray if you wish, just to hold that in place. And then straight down the centre with my piece of lace. And this looks blue, but it does dry clear. And I'm going to sew just along the centre of the ribbon, not visible. So I want the stitches to be underneath where this ribbon's going to go. So I'm just going to sew down the centre here. And this is going to be loose, and I kind of like that idea. And then my final piece of ribbon is going to go over the top. Now, of course, you can, oh, that's a big blob, hand sew this on if you wanted to. You could use some decorative stitches on your sewing machine. I'm going to just pop that there. Now, this is going to be sewn into the seams here, but that does mean that this is going to be quite loose. But I'm going to secure the centre with a couple of buttons, maybe some beads as well. So let's trim down the edges. So this is now going to be the same shape as the heart. Of course, you could carry on sewing. You could put a few decorative stitches on your sewing machine down the centre. That would look very nice as well. So I have this. And then I'm going to put a couple of buttons on here like that. I'm also going to make some little rosettes with the lace, but I think that should go at the side over there. But I'm going to put those on after I've completed this, because remember, this still needs to be sewn together and then turn the right side out, and I don't want to risk anything that's too kind of dimensional getting stuck into the seam allowance. So let's just put a couple of buttons on here for now. So I'm going to come through from the back. Put that out of the way. And because these buttons are just decorative, I'm going to take my thread over the edge of the button and back into the fabric. You wouldn't be able to do this with a button that you're actually going to wear, because you wouldn't be able to use it properly. But then let's go into the next hole here. And round again. Pull it nice and tight. Into this one, out there. And then finally the last hole. And then without breaking the thread, I'm just going to go along to the next button. So I've got a smaller button I'm going to use here, and do the same thing. Just got a bit of a knot at the back. Whoops, there we go. And just finish off with a knot at the back. And there's my buttons on. So I'm going to sew the front and the back pieces together now. So right sides together. And line up the little V shape at the top of the heart and the point at the bottom. And then we'll sew all around the edge. Take out your pins, snip across the point at the bottom and snip just into the seam and the V shape at the top. Then you'll need your quick unpick, and we'll just undo a few stitches from that centre seam. just big enough so I can turn it the right side out. And then let's turn this through. So if you have a turning tool, these can come in quite handy. So push out the point and use the round end to just push through the curve of the heart. I'm going to iron that again. Because I'm using linen, it does tend to crease rather a lot, which is part of the charm of the fabric, but I didn't want it to be quite so creased. And then take your toy filler and fill this nice and firmly. The more packing you can get in here, the smoother the seams seem to be. So just keep pushing it in until you've got a nice fat heart. And let's sew the opening closed, and I'm going to use a ladder stitch. So take the needle from the inside of the hole, the gap, through one side of the fabric, and then directly in opposite on the other side of the fabric, back into this seam allowance again. So you can see the seam allowance is folded over, so I can see exactly where I should be sewing. Try and use small stitches and take your time with it. Just got a thread there, let me just snip that off. I'll do a few more stitches here, so again into one side, directly opposite to the other side. So you can see why it's called a ladder stitch, because you can see kind of the rungs going from one side to another. And then every so often, oh, and I'm using a double thread as well to make it nice and strong. Let's just pull those threads together and that'll close the opening, and you should have a really nice seam. So the smaller the stitches you use, you can emulate the size of the stitches on your sewing machine, and they should be barely visible if you really take your time. But after all, this is on the back of the heart, so don't worry too much if your stitches aren't quite perfect. So again, just every few stitches, pull that tight until we get to the end. And then I like to finish with a tiny knot. So go over the stitch a couple of times in the same place, wrap your thread around the needle a few times like a little French knot, and then pull that through. Now I think we need some more embellishments on the front of the heart. So let's double up my thread again, and I'm going to gather some of the smaller the narrow pieces of lace to make them into little rosettes. So I've cut these into lengths of about 10 inches, and I'm just going to make a running stitch along one side of the lace, and it's just going to gather up into a spiral. So you could do this with ribbon as well. I mean, there's many different ways. There's a few techniques in the book for making ribbon flowers or burlap or hessian flowers, but this is just a really simple decoration. But as I said before, you know, you can decorate these things as much or as little as you want to. It'd be quite nice as well to put something like a lavender or some essence onto your toy filler before you put it in there, or as you're putting it in there, before you stitch the gap at the back. And this will make a lovely fragrant hanging heart to maybe hang in I was going to say to hang in a wardrobe, but it'd be a shame to hang it out of sight, really, wouldn't it? Maybe over the edge of a bed would look nice. Oh, just got that caught around the lace. That's it. So go all the way to the end and then pull it up, and you can see it just twist round into a little floret. So let's just arrange this so that it looks quite neat and stays flat. And then I'll hold the ends together with a couple of stitches. But before I break the thread, I'm going to take the needle back through the centre, and I've got some little beads. So I'm going to thread that through a bead and bring it back out again. And then that can go on the side here, I think. Now you can stitch this on, obviously. I'm going to glue it on. I'm just going to finish off the thread at the back. So a nice strong wet fabric glue would work well. Snip that away. So that's going to go there. You see what I mean about putting these kind of embellishments on after, because that might have interfered with the seam allowance if I'd have sewn it on before. I was thinking as well I could make maybe some little tails from the... No, I shan't do that. Don't throw away the bits that you cut off if you do that. So that is going to go there. So Glutamine HT2 glue I find to be the strongest glue for things like this. So a nice big dollop, and pop that in place. So I can leave that to dry for just a second. And to hang my heart, I'm going to use a piece of string. Now I didn't put the ribbon in the seam allowance, or the string in the seam allowance as I was putting the heart together deliberately, because you'll tend to find, I mean, ideally you need this hanging right in the centre, but if you sew it into the seam, when you turn it through, the point of the heart doesn't really sit very well. So I find it easier, whether using a ribbon or a string or a cord or whatever it is you're using, to sew this on afterwards. So that's what I'm going to do now. So measure the length that you want, and if you're doing a few of these, they could be all different lengths. I think that looks right for mine, so that is about 10 inches long. I'm actually going to iron the string because it looks a little bit wobbly where it's come off the ball. It's better to flatten that out a little bit. And then I'm going to loop this over with a little bit of excess here, and I am going to sew this one as opposed to gluing it. So let's just come in the centre of the heart there. So it's a loose weave, so it's just pulled the thread through a little bit, so I'll go over that a couple of times. And then pop the string over the centre. Move that out of the way. And sew it right in the centre here. So that should do it. Now I could add another button to the centre here. This I'm just going to tie in a knot. You could leave the string a little bit longer and make it into a bow, but I just think a little knot in the middle would look nice. And there's my little heart finished. So in the book I made 3 of those and looped them over a wooden coat hanger which I painted white. You could hang these up, of course, individually, make as many as you like, but I think wouldn't a row of them like heart-shaped garland or bunting would look really sweet as well. And they're not just decorations, you could actually use these as a pincushion too. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy making yours. I shall see you soon.